Good morning, everybody. Here we are, new day, new lecture. All right. Today we're going to start talking about groups and work teams, and this will draw heavily on social psychology. That's for darn sure. In particular, this first portion of this presentation, groups and teams and influences on groups and things of this nature. Then we're going to move into group decision making, and we'll talk about it fundamentally. Are four heads better than one? I mean, if you put one person together to make a decision, do four people coming together make a better decision? Okay, powerfully important question. And then the last portion of this particular slideshow will be different types of groups and teams that are created in organizations. So a work group, just as a definition, independent collection of individuals who share responsibility for organizational outcomes, whatever. They can be either formal or informal. Formal groups are those that are set up by the organization itself, often in the form of, say, a committee or something of this nature. But informal groups exist as well. And informal groups satisfy a lot of the needs of the organization that are less tangible. All right, they things such as security and safety and socialization needs and all of these needs of the workers that are that help improve job performance. How about that? The word team and the word group are very synonymous with each other, but teams, work groups in which actions of individuals are interdependent and coordinated. So the outcomes affect all of them. The behaviors need to work together. Members have specified roles, common objectives, and goals. Okay? So when talking about groups, we want to talk about the social influences. I warned you it would be social psychology here. So the social influences that occur in groups. And we'll talk about norms and roles and conflict and cohesion and different topics which you might find in chapters of a social psych text. So norms are shared expectations at appropriate behaviors or appropriate response ways to respond. It's kind of, you'll find some of the work on organizational culture will be like organizational norms or something. Descriptive norms are the ones that tell you how you're supposed to behave. Wait. Oh no, duh. Descriptive norms are those that describe other people's behaviors. Okay, and if you don't follow those norms, you haven't broken a rule usually, but people will like maybe look at you differently, maybe as a social outcast or something. Prescriptive norms are often laws or rules, okay? Those that are formally written down. They suggest people should do, feel, or think this way, okay? And so, literally in a legal perspective, a law is a prescriptive norm, right? It is not a suggestion, right? But yeah, I guess it's a suggestion. It's your choice whether or not you want to get in or not. Okay, norms, even they might be developed formally at the beginning, but they get passed down and then adjusted as new members of different groups come in, that the norms will then change to fit the newcomers as well. Okay? So when we talk about conformity and obedience, I'm just going to very briefly talk about some of the social psychological literature on this stuff. Number one, behavior is contagious. Okay, if one person yawns, others are likely to follow. In a classroom, if one student is, then many others will follow. Okay, so we find that the same thing can happen in an organizational sense. If certain members of the organization or a group or team are acting in one way, then other members will copy it. Why do we conform to other people? Or we'll talk obey, but why do we conform? Why do we change our behavior to fit others? Normative social influence is this idea that we do not want disapproval. Okay, that is to say, if you behave differently from other people, they usually look at you weird. Okay, so you're sitting there at a performance, especially with the children. Oh God, you go through enough children's performances, concerts and plays, and they get to a point and you're not particularly impressed, but others start clapping. You're like, oh, I guess I gotta do it, right? Informational social influence, however, is a little bit different. See, normative social influence, you change your behavior, but you don't particularly change what you believe. You clap your hands, but it doesn't make you believe that what you just witnessed was actually worth clapping for, okay? Informational social influence, on the other hand, is when you take others' behaviors, take a look at what they're doing, modify yourself, but you truly come to believe it because others' behaviors are a source of information to you, okay? Normative, you don't want to stick out and look different. Informational, other people do in fact provide important information. In the classic study, Solomon Ash's work, Solomon Asch put together this simple presentation where he would put a standard line, 3 comparisons lines, and say which one is equal. Okay, when people are doing this thing all by themselves, they're 99% correct. Okay, it's a pretty easy task. But Solomon Asch put people into a group with confederates. You know, confederates are people that work for the experimenter, but the participant in the study doesn't know that they're working for the experimenter. Okay, and so you've got like 5 other people, and you know they're going to be like doing this comparison in a group setting, and all of a sudden the first person who's a confederate looks at this and goes, oh, the answer's 3, and the second person goes 3, and the third person goes 3, and the fourth person goes 3, and the fifth person goes 3. Now all of a sudden we get to the last person, the one that's an actual participant, and the actual participant will 1/3 of the time incorrectly give the answer of 3. Now, clearly, this person knows the correct answer because remember, if they're sitting by themselves, they're correct 99% of the time. But if you have this influence on you, and so we assume what's happening that we don't know, we assume that the group pressure is creating normative social influence. This person, after hearing 5 other people say the correct answer is 3, this person does not want to look stupid, so they're going to modify their response to say 3 to fit in with the group. Well, if you make a person feel incompetent or insecure, they're even more likely, more than 1 in 3, right? Even more likely to conform. And obviously, I hope you realize that this is a silly study, you know, with lines, but this conformity also includes in the workplace, okay? And so let's say you believe you have the most efficient way to do the job, and some other people think theirs is better, and will you conform to the other people? So it's clearly got its influences in an IO context as well. Conformity is stronger if a group has at least 3 people, and the group is unanimous. Turns out that if there's even one person that comes along and says the correct answer of 2, the real participant will always get the correct answer 2. You just need one person to help you out. If you admire a group's status or attractiveness, you'll be more likely to conform. Or let's say, for example, you're the new employee. You're far more likely to conform to company standards if you're the new guy. Okay? And if others can see your behavior. Yeah, that's a different one. But they've also found huge cultural problems for conformity. And in particular, in Asian business settings, what happens is that in particular, you take conformity and you combine this with, traditional hierarchy of respect from an Asian culture. And if the boss says, "Do you think this is a good idea?" everybody says yes. Okay, and we'll come back to that idea later. How it was almost prevented Toyota and the other Japanese car companies from becoming successful. Now, conformity is interesting. You're changing your behavior. Obedience, you are obeying a direct command. Okay? And so I'm not going to get all of the details on this study because this is quite a long study. But if you recall very briefly, what happened was that you have a participant and a learner. The participant is a real person, a real experiment. The learner is a confederate, but the participant believes that the learner is also a participant like themselves. And they go through a series of things here where the participant is going to teach the learner, and at certain points the learner starts to make mistakes. And every single time the learner makes a mistake, your job is to give them an electrical shock. But the kicker is, each and every time the learner makes a mistake, you have to give an electrical shock that is larger than the one you previously gave. Okay? So the first shock is 15, then 30 volts, then 45 volts. all the way up to 450. And so what happens, obviously nobody got shocked, okay? That's called deception. But anyway, what happened was at certain points, these participants would say, hey, this isn't right. I mean, I shouldn't be shocking this person with 300 volts. And so Milgram went through a series of little prompts as the experimenter. This is science. You must continue. And people are like, well, if it's science, okay, and started to continue to shock people. But he had 4 different prompts, and I think the last one was, you must continue. So he was trying to instill this point of obedience, okay? Not just conformity, not just following others' behaviors, but how far would people go in response to a direct command? Well, it was pretty shocking, in fact, how far people would go in response to a direct command. I mean, they were shocking to the point where, I mean, you watch videos on YouTube or something for details, but they were shocking to the point where they honestly thought they had killed another human being, and they continued to shock the dead body just because a scientist in a white lab coat said, this is science. Okay? Crazy shit. So, Stanley Milgram and Solomon Asch created these crazy experiments, and it was amazing how quickly children, doesn't mean people's behavior. And so all of a sudden, what their fundamental idea was that ordinary people simply doing their jobs with no particular hostility can become agents in a terrible destructive process. And so this can absolutely happen in a factory, in a company. The boss says do this and you don't agree with them, but you do it anyway. Why? Because that's what you're supposed to do. Okay. Well, sometimes though, others, again, conformity and obedience being things that influence us. Another thing that might influence us in a group is social facilitation. And this is one whereby our performance improves in the presence of others. And so it's really, it works well with simple tasks, not with well-learned tasks. Like say, for example, after a light turns green, people drive the first 100 yards 15% faster if there's a car next to them. Okay, that's just nuts. Okay, and so we work harder when there's others around us. Okay, I don't know that we now, there's a lot of theories about why that's true, but I'm not teaching social psych today. So we'll just leave it. In the presence of others, people tend to perform better on a well-learned task. In the presence of others, if it's not a well-learned task, actually performance goes down. Okay, so that's a different thing. Roles. We talked about role confusion and whatnot in previous topics, but roles, sets of behaviors that are expected of a person who occupies a particular position in a group or organization. Because I am a faculty, certain parts of my role, the behaviors I'm expected to have. Office hours, I'm expected to dress nicely, I'm expected to be polite. Ish, give me a break. All right. And so we can talk about role concepts, role differentiation. But what we find is that the roles that we're put in, we often become those roles. That we take on even though when we start a new role, we are often faking, okay? And I think I might have talked about this recently because it's in my brain, so it must have been in one of the previous presentations somewhere. But when we get put into a new role, we're acting, we're pretending. But when we're in the role for a while, it becomes real. And the attitudes, that's right, in the attitudes chapter. Attitudes topic. There ain't no chapters. Topics. Okay, but in the attitude topic, I remember. Conflict, yeah. Conflict happens in groups. Try doing a group project and see the conflict. You can have relationship conflict, which is the tension and friction that emerges, and it can hurt team performance. And this is usually like, I think so-and-so is not pulling their weight. All right, well, we'll let that go. Task conflict, when team members have different ideas regarding the work to be done. Yeah, that's crazy. When a group gets together and the first question they ask is, what are we here for? All right, that can get some real task conflict. That's how it works, by the way, with faculty committees. Every time, every single year at the beginning of the year, when you walk into these faculty committees, you get into these committees and you sit down and everybody looks at each other and goes, what are we supposed to do? And that's where we pull out the faculty handbook and read it. Shh. Faculty are not incompetent. Well, process conflict as a third form. When group members have an incompatible idea about how the work should be accomplished. So even if different members can agree on the same goal, okay? And I'm going to be I believe that the Democrats and the Republicans fundamentally have the same basic ideas. We want America to be a better place, okay? We want to improve our nation. We want our children to be safe. We want, most of our goals are the same. But what we disagree on, or what the problem is process conflict. How do we get there, okay? So it's a big deal, big problem. Cohesion. Cohesion is, as a definition, the strength of the group members' attraction to maintaining membership in the group and the strength of the link. So in other words, how tight the relationships are. Cohesive groups are more satisfied than non-cohesive groups. Cohesive groups perform better. But cohesive groups can lead to groupthink, and we're going to come back to groupthink at some point. But cohesive groups aren't always good, okay? Because they become so blindly loyal to the group that they outright ignore anything that's happening outside the group. Tuckman developed 5 stages about how groups develop. When 5 individuals are placed together, they don't instantly become a group, okay? They have to develop a group. And it goes through 5 stages. In the first stage, forming, people are polite. It's usually small talk, just get acquainted. Storming, interactions are characterized by disagreement. Members start to question each other. Conflict starts to emerge. Norming, you start to get unity. All groups have their norms. So at first, you have 5 individuals politely forming. Then you have 5 individuals that are starting to find differences among each other. And then you start to norm, where the individuals start to converge on each other. Performing, members become focused on productivity and goal achievement. Okay, this is where things get done. Adjourning, roles are terminated, relationships weaken, and they move on. Okay. In group development, however, we've got these 5 stages here. These 5 stages. And what punctuated equilibrium is, well, basically forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning do not slowly blend into each other, okay? They don't slowly blend. So what this punctuated equilibrium, the word, they stole it from the theory of punctuated evolution, punctuated equilibrium from evolution, Stephen Jay Gould's phrase. But the idea is that these stages do not slowly and gradually develop into each other. They make radically fast shifts. First you're forming, then you're storming, then you're norming. It's just boom. That's the idea, that they don't gradually shift together, don't gradually merge together. That's the basic idea. Another thing that emerges often in groups, as you all know, is social loafing. Okay, and that is, in a group setting, people will be putting together less effort if the entire. See, what happens is that you've got 5 people working together. At the end, there will be a single outcome. All 5 individuals will receive the same outcome. Okay? And so what happens is the 5 individuals say, you mean even if I don't do anything, I get that outcome? All right, here I go. And so what we find is social loafing occurs when you cannot identify the input of each individual member. Okay, so imagine like a relay race. Okay, on a relay race, where you've got, each runner runs 100 meters or something, then they hand off the baton. The outcome at the end is the combined performance of all members, and they all share in that outcome. But you can visually identify the performance of each member. And if you've ever seen a relay race on television, they'll have a little stopwatch going this person spent this much time on this leg of the race. They identify performance. But if you do something else like rope pulling is a classic example, and what happens is you're playing a game of tug of war or something like that with a rope, and the outcome is the combined effort of all members pulling together. But you can't identify how much any one person is, in fact, putting into the system. Okay? So if individuals believe that their individual effort can be identified, or when they believe that others will be personally affected by their effort, then but a free rider is, or free riding rather, well, free rider, employees do less than their share of work but share equally in the rewards. The sucker effect. Oh my God. Co-workers become aware and concerned about the free riding of others. Yes, you got the free riders that are along for a free ride and the suckers that are pulling all the work and only getting that limited rewards. And social compensation. Employees will sometimes increase efforts because they don't anticipate much help. Yeah, I got put on a few group projects when I was in college. And I guess my problem was a little bit differently. If my name is going to go on the finished project, the damn thing is going to be perfect, okay? There is no way I'm going to let you put a shitty thing into anything with my name on it. I still remember, oh my God, I was working with Ed. He was so stupid. We were supposed to write a paper together, and I write the first part, and he writes the second part. And he gives me his part, and it is just so, I would never put my name anywhere in the ballpark of that paper. And so I said, okay, I'll take care of merging the two together. I just threw his shit in the garbage and completely started over from scratch. And at the end, he was so proud that he got an A. And I was just like, you dumb shit. All right, that's social compensation. No bitterness, just saying I wouldn't put my name on something that isn't perfect. All right? All right. Diffusion of responsibility is a little bit different. This is social psychology, but it can definitely emerge in groups. Diffusion of responsibility is that people are less likely to help others that need help if there's a lot of other people around. So Latane and Dabbs are the original workers for this. They went out into all kinds of different places, and I believe they dropped pencils, right? Pencils is the most common thing in an elevator and stuff like that. And who's going to help them pick up the pencils? Pretty straightforward. And it was pretty straightforward. If you drop pencils in front of one other person, they're probably going to help you pick them up. If you drop pencils in front of 10 other people, best of luck picking up the pencils, okay? Is not probably going to get much help. So in order for people to intervene or help or to work with each other, they have to notice that somebody needs help. Obviously, if you don't notice, then no help is given. You have to look at it and say, is this an emergency? Is this something that is in need of help? If yes, then. If no, then. I've seen situations where they, like, say, for example, they took people and they had them pass out on the street. Not actually pass out, lay down. Right? And then they had two different scenarios. In one situation, they were just passed out. In the second one, they were passed out and there was a liquor bottle next to them. Guess what happens? If you're passed out and there's a liquor bottle next to you, nobody helps you because they don't interpret it as an emergency, right? You're just passed out. All right. Assume responsibility. So I've noticed the incident. I've said it is an emergency. Am I the one that should be helping? Is there somebody else here that, knows CPR better than I do? Something of this nature. So it's really hard to, get past this step. But only if all of these steps have been completed will, in fact, help be given. Deindividuation is actually kind of funky. And this is the effect that occurs when you are anonymous in some way. And so if you are anonymous, your behavior becomes quite destructive. It's kind of a scary thing. In a real interesting study, they took a group of New York University women and put hoods on them and had them decide how much shock to give to an individual. It's just like when they were wearing the hoods and you couldn't identify them, they gave twice as much electrical shock as if they did not have hoods on their heads. It was really, really crazy scary. And then finally, group polarization. This is a pretty big one. if you've got 5 people in a group and they all walk in with positive attitudes or something like that, they're going to walk out with even more positive attitudes. They will never look at the other side of the argument. They will never. So, like minded people, when they discuss things together, become even more like minded and even more extreme than they had been to begin with. Look at this. The individual differences among college freshmen at a university diminish by the time they're seniors. So, as freshmen, they're radically different from each other. By senior year, they're almost all exactly the same. All right, so we'll stop with that, and we'll talk about other group issues in the next couple of presentations for this topic.